Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Happy Monday and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all good. Hope you've all recovered from what was a very, very emotionally draining and taxing game, I would say, yesterday at the bridge. I got back from the bridge, and so I had this long sort of hour commute home. Call it a commute because I was working. I suppose you can call it a commute. Can you call going to a football game a commute? I don't know. Anyway, I had all that time on the train with obviously no phone signal because you just don't have phone signal on the underground most of the way. And so normally using that hour or so, I'd come home quite clear on what my thoughts were and where I thought it went wrong and where I thought we could have done better, etc., etc. And I've woken up this morning and I'm still struggling for clarity. I think this is such a difficult game to analyze. I think this is the most difficult game to analyze that we've played this season. I think there are multiple reasons for that. And we're going to get into all of that today on the pod. Of course, I always write 5 or 6 bullet points, right? When I go into a podcast, I probably write 5 or 6 bullet points down on a piece of paper or on one of these like little sticky notes. Look, this is an example of what I did on the last pod. Okay, 4 bullet points versus what I've done for today's pod. Because there is so much to unpack. There is so much to analyze. And I suppose the big question is good point or bad point. That's what everybody will be asking themselves this morning. And I'll give you my kind of overarching thought on that to start the show. And then we'll kind of work our way backwards. Good point, bad point. I would say it's a good point in November, probably not a good point in April. That's how I would look at this. A friend of mine said that to me, and I thought that was nail on the head. I thought it was perfect. A really good way of describing it and breaking it all down. Look, on the show today, we're going to talk about the injury news that we got pre-kickoff, which none of us saw coming, to the point where William Saliba was on the bus. He got off the bus in his tracksuit like every other Arsenal player yesterday. Nobody had a clue that he was going to miss the game. We'll talk about the impact that had. I also want to talk about our tactical approach to the game yesterday, because I thought the tactical approach had to change given the personnel issues that we had, and I don't think it did. So that's somewhere where I am going to be critical, and I do have some thoughts on that. I want to talk about some individual performances. I want to cover Eze Martinelli. I want to cover the first half in general. We'll cover, of course, the red card, the Chelsea goal, the Arsenal goal, and all the other big moments. And I also want to talk about some of the substitutions, because I think maybe 2 of the 6 in total across both teams had the desired effect. Both managers, I felt, struggled to change the game in their favour with the options that they had on their bench. So there's a lot to unpack on today's show. And that's why I'm going to ask you, in case I get into it and I forget, before we get to that point, to leave a like on the video if you're with us on YouTube, to subscribe to the channel as well if you are new. All of that stuff really does help. If you're listening to us on audio, whether that's Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else, please do leave us a review, as that stuff really does help. And if you want to go one further and support me here on the Chronicles of a Gooner to bring you even more content, you can sign up on Patreon. You can use the QR code in the top corner of the screen or the link in the description. If you're listening to us, come over to Patreon. You're going to get a bonus episode later on today. You're also going to get access to our Discord server, and you can tune in to every single Chronicles of a Gooner podcast without any ads. Those are the benefits, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee. So yeah, okay, let's get into it, shall we? Let's break it all down. And I'm going to start with, obviously, the news that rocked us, is fair to say, going into the game. The news that William Saliba was out. Now, nobody saw this coming. It turns out that he picked up some sort of knock in Saturday's training session. What that knock was exactly, I couldn't tell you. How severe it is, I can't tell you because we don't know. There was very, very little information available to members of the media yesterday, or at least to me. Maybe some with better contacts and stronger relationships might be able to provide a bit of insight over the coming days. But for me, there was no clarity whatsoever. I have no idea what this problem is specifically and how long it could rule William Saliba out for. But, you're already going into the game with one half of your world-class central defensive pairing missing. The last thing you need is to lose the other one. Like, I'd have probably rather lost any other player yesterday than William Saliba, because as good as I think Mosquera is when he's partnered with a world-class centre-back, as good as I think Piero Hincapie is when he's partnered with a world-class centre-back, playing the two together was really problematic for us. And it's not to sit here and say that neither of them are good players or that we made a mistake signing them or even that they've been overhyped in the past. No, because when we've judged them on previous appearances, we've judged them, very, very positively because their performances have shown us that. But to ask them both to play in a game like this was a problem. And I also thought that ahead of them, we had problems. I thought our midfield was the biggest problem yesterday, more so than the two centre-backs in terms of those individual performances. And then you factor in the cards. Mosquera picks up a booking, Hincapie picks up a booking, Calafiori playing at left-back picks up a booking early, Zubimendi picks up a booking. How the hell Jurriën Timber didn't pick up a booking in that first half or looked like a clothesline, I just don't know. But I think, we've talked so much this season about Arsenal's strength in depth. Well, it was really put to the test yesterday in that defensive area in particular, because, it's about familiarity. It's about partnerships. It's about connections. You can talk about players being at a certain level individually, and that's fine, but they've got to build that relationship. That's how you, produce a really strong, cohesive defensive unit. And I would argue that profile-wise, it wasn't that imbalanced. Like Hincapie likes to step out, likes to snap away at you, prefers to kind of be the aggressor of the two centre halves. And Mosquera's probably, of the two of them, the more Saliba-like. So in theory, it didn't feel like it was going to be as bad as it was. I say it was bad, and then I look at the stats, and this was, again, something that I was thinking about last night on the way home. Chelsea's XG was 0.79. They only managed 4 shots on target. So it's not like they battered us. They had 20 touches in the opposition box, which is quite low for Chelsea. It's not like they were a disaster, but you could see that there was a big drop-off from Saliba, Gabriel, or one of Saliba and Gabriel with any one of these two guys. You could see the drop-off straight away. I thought they started the game a little bit nervously, both of them. I felt like they got caught in two minds. They didn't know whether to step high. They didn't know whether to sit deep. They kind of got caught in no man's land on a few occasions and had to make sort of rash decisions at times. They didn't attack the ball as aggressively, I didn't think, when the long balls were coming from Chelsea, as Gabriel and Saliba would. I thought there was space. There were a lot of spaces in that area of the pitch. And normally you look at Saliba and Gabriel and you say, spaces, no problem. Those guys can handle the spaces. And that gives you a comfort in terms of vacating your midfield and pushing people further up the pitch, because you do it in the knowledge that those two guys are more than equipped to handle it. Not the case when it's Hincapie and Mosquera. Neither of them were particularly good in terms of distribution out of the back line. And we really lost something there. You could see that. You could feel that. So those were some of the issues that I could see. But I do want to talk about this tactically in a sort of broader context, because I think that, yes, it wasn't ideal going there with Hincapie and Mosquera. And by the way, lots of you criticized me in the build up to this game for saying, do you know what? I'd be content with a draw at Stamford Bridge. Lots of you said I was being a coward when I predicted 1-1. Turns out I was spot on both fronts. And, I'm not that guy that blows his own trumpet all the time. But if I get that level of shit for it, then you bet I'm going to come out and I'm going to say it when I got it right. And I said that we would be, or I would be content with a point, all things considered, before I knew that Saliba was out. Now, the flip side is that I didn't know that Moises Caicedo was going to get sent off. And obviously, Moises Caicedo's red card and the fact that Chelsea played, the best part of an hour with 10 men, it does change things in terms of, what you wanted out of the game. And so that's why I'm torn between good point and bad point. Going into the game, I'd have said good point. Obviously, the Saliba thing, in some people's eyes, will make it an even better point. But then when you factor that they went down to 10 for as long as they did, it was one of their best players, Moises Caicedo, that made way. All of a sudden, you start to look at it through a slightly different lens. And I think for me personally, that's where the confusion comes in. But I want to talk a lot about this game tactically, because I think it was a really, really interesting game tactically. That's why I've written so many notes. I think there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to get into. So if I just bring up on the screen my tactics board so you guys can see it. If you're listening, don't worry. I will do my best to explain the points I'm making. If you prefer to come over to the YouTube channel so that you can, of course, see what I'm on about, then you can do that as well. So the team to start was Raya in goal. It was Timber at right back, Mosquera, Hincapie, and Calafiori across the back. Zubimendi, Rice, and Eza in the midfield with Martinelli left, Saka right, and Merino playing as the makeshift centre forward. Okay, so Chelsea did something really, really clever. Now, ordinarily, what Arsenal like to do, okay, when they play a team like Chelsea, is they like to try and dominate by squeezing the opponent up. So you like to have your two wingers playing high. With Eze in the team, he gets close to Merino. Zubimendi and Rice like to step up. Timber joins in with the midfield. Calafiori can do that too. And normally, when it's Saliba and Gabriel, they step up really high. Do you know why? Because they feel really comfortable and confident in that. These spaces in behind, if the opposition want to drop the ball over the top of us and be more direct, they can handle it. They've got the pace, they've got the know-how, they've got the aerial capabilities. They know that if you drop the ball in behind them, most of the time they're going to win it. They're going to get there first. And also you've got David Raya, who always starts with a really high position. And for that reason, there's even more security when the ball goes over the top. Now, does that lead to David Raya from time to time getting lobbed? Yes, it does, as was highlighted against Spurs the other day. But it's all part of the system. It's all part of the bigger plan. It's all part of the Arsenal machine, if you like. What Chelsea did really, really well yesterday, and we failed to respond to, was utilize their centre forward in a really, really clever way. Now, we wondered what Enzo Maresca was going to do at centre forward. He brought João Pedro back into the team, and this was key in causing us all sorts of problems. What João Pedro did really, really well was go like this. Do you know what? At times, I'm going to go high, and I'm going to pin Mosquera and Hincapie, two centre-halves who will be a little bit nervous because it's a big occasion for them. They're getting their chance, etc., etc. Hold on, what have I done here? Just get rid of that. There you go. Two centre-halves who it's a big day for. They're going to be a little bit nervous. I think when you're nervous, naturally what you do is you drop 5 yards, don't you? You drop that little bit deeper. And Pedro did a really good job of going high and taking Hincapie and Mosquera further back. Our midfield doesn't necessarily want to sink. So you end up creating a bigger space between the midfield and the defense. And then when the time was right, João Pedro would drop back inside. And there were points where Hincapie went with him, and that left us exposed at the back. There were points where Hincapie didn't go with him, and so he had space and time. And with the midfield being caught up the pitch because Chelsea were going a lot longer and a lot more direct, their runners were able to turn and spin, knowing what was coming from the goalkeeper and from the centre-halves, and get up the pitch really, really quickly and start to attack us in that space and cause us problems in that space between our midfield and our defence. Whenever we tried to build out, we struggled. Mosquera and Hincapie with distribution, I felt struggled. They struggled to move the ball through the lines in the way that we normally do. Their wingers worked incredibly hard to limit Timber and Calafiori's influences, and their wingers at times stayed really, really high, which again pins back our defense. But unless your midfield react to that, then you're going to have a problem. And this tactically was my biggest frustration with what we saw yesterday. We can talk about the centre backs and the difference. I don't know about you, but I knew when I saw the team that it wasn't going to be the same. Okay. Nobody's naive enough to think that when you are missing arguably two of the best 5 central defenders in world football, you're going to be the same. Like, nobody's naive enough to think that, right? Surely. But tactically, we had the power, I think, to minimize the impact of those two being missing. We had to be more compact. We had to play in a better shape. Now, obviously, we weren't helped by the fact that we picked up so many yellow cards. But those yellow cards were as a result of exactly what I've just explained. Players spinning in behind. If you look at the Zubimendi booking, okay, Zubimendi gets booked because Hincapie goes hunting into the midfield. On that occasion, he follows João Pedro. And Zubimendi has to make a foul to stop Chelsea exposing that. If you look at some of the others, situations caused by the fact that the spaces and the distances between our defense and our midfield were just too big. That, for me, was the key to our struggles in that first half. It really, really was. So the distribution wasn't right, and that meant that whenever we tried to build out, it would very, very quickly end up coming straight back the other way. Some of our passing in that first half was really, really sloppy. Okay, there were times where Merino dropped deep and went to play a simple pass left or right, would get it wrong. Martinelli would work the ball in field, get it wrong. Saka played one across the pitch in the first half that he got completely wrong. And so every time we look to build out and every time we look to be our more expansive selves, very, very quickly, 1 or 2, maybe sometimes 3 passes into the move, we were having to spin back and sprint back towards our own goal. And we had all sorts of problems. There's a few other things I want to highlight from that first half. We'll get to the red card in a minute because I think the red card is a really crucial bit in terms of the analysis here. But just to kind of round up on that midfield chat and the tactical chat, what needed to happen was that Zubimendi needed to sit, was that Declan Rice needed to sit. This was the key. Declan Rice shouldn't have been playing his normal game yesterday. And it's not a slight on Declan Rice, okay? He's a top player. When I say he should have been sitting deeper and he should have been doing a slightly different role, that's not because he wasn't good enough doing the role that he normally does. It's because he's so damn good in every single phase of the game that I want him there in that instance, under those circumstances, to help protect. If Declan Rice sits alongside Zubimendi as 2 6s, guess what? João Pedro isn't having anywhere near as much an impact on the game. He goes high, Mosquera and Hincapie eat him up. He drops slightly deeper, one of Rice and Zubimendi can pick him up. Eze, not the game for him. Not the game for him at all. He doesn't want to be dropping deep and running back towards his own goal and getting involved in duels. It's not his game. But I just felt that with the way that Chelsea were playing, with the fact that we probably had to cover the centre of the defence just a little bit more than we normally do, with all of that in mind, the right way to approach this game was to say, especially after the first 10 minutes, man, when you could see it happening, was to say, Declan, I'm pulling you in. You need to sit and you need to drop and you need to play alongside Zubimendi. Okay? And then I want Merino dropping deep. And Merino plays like a false 9 a lot of the time anyway, and creating a box almost with Eberici Eze. And then I want one of Martinelli or Saka staying high. And when we do win possession back, what do? You go long to Saka, long to Martinelli, and then Merino and Eze can spin and get up there and support them. And you sort of attack with 4 players while maintaining that defensive core of the 6. Timber, Mosquera, Hincapie, Calafiori, Rice, Zubimendi. That's what had to happen for me about 10 or so minutes into the game. And my big frustration was that we never reacted to that. We never adjusted to deal with the issues that Chelsea were repeatedly causing us. And we just kept doing the same things. And when you realize that you're passing For whatever reason on that day, you're passing out from the back. It's not as slick. It's not as crisp. You're not breaking the lines. You're making silly mistakes. What the manager should be doing there for me is reining it all in and saying, hold on a minute, hit the pause button here, and let's focus on being compact and gradually build our way into this game. And we just didn't do that. And in a lot of ways, the Caicedo red card, it saved us. The Chelsea goal was a good thing in a weird, strange, and wacky way. And you might be thinking, what the hell are you talking about? We'll get into that after the break, because I really do think those two moments in the game, they were massive. The red card, you would say, was always going to help us. The goal, you might be thinking, I've lost the plot. But I'll explain exactly what I mean after this really, really short pause. We're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into why I think the red card and the goal were crucial to us getting anything out of this game. And when I say the goal, I mean Chelsea's goal, by the way. Yeah, hear me out. Sounds mad, I know, but hear me out.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. Really love to hear from you in the comments as well. We will spend some time towards the end of the show taking your questions and thoughts on the game. I've got a few questions from X that I want to get into as well. So we'll come to the Caicedo red card in a minute. I mentioned that I didn't think this was Eze's game, not the right game for him. Couldn't get the ball into him. This was a game for Martin Odegaard for me, but obviously he wasn't fit enough to start. Martinelli, it probably wasn't a game for him either, unless you played the way that I've described, which is sit back, sit deep, be compact, and look to go a bit more direct ourselves and look to hit the channels and the spaces in behind, in which case Martinelli's perfectly suited, but that wasn't what we were trying to do. I said the first half was sloppy, poor passes every time we tried to break out, and we were having to spin back and run towards our own goal. And yes, fatigue played a massive part in this, by the way, because if everybody's at 100%, if you haven't had the week that we've just had, you probably find a way of making what Mikel planned work. But it clearly wasn't going to work. You could see that 10 minutes in. And I felt that we needed to react and adjust, and we didn't. And then we got our get out of jail free card, which was that red card. It really, really was. Because what the red card did was obviously make it 10 versus 11, but it changed the pattern of the game. It changed the pattern of the game because it meant that Chelsea had no choice but to just retreat a little bit and play in a way where it was going to be more transitional. Play in a way where they were going to have to soak up a little bit, knowing that with that extra man, we'd probably start to take control of possession, and they were going to have to be more incisive, more efficient in possession, and they were going to have to look to try and break on us whenever those opportunities presented themselves. And then we go in at halftime. We go in at halftime, and I thought, good, because we need to reset. We need to reset badly. And so we had the opportunity, of course, to do that. And I wondered how Chelsea were going to come out in the second half. I thought, are they going to now sit with a low block? But the fact that it was in my mind that they might do that, it made me feel more comfortable in the way that the remainder of the game was going to go, because I thought we're not going to have as many issues dealing with the problems that we've had so far, like the João Pedro dropping deep thing, the midfielders getting forward, the likes of Reece James getting on the ball and sending long diagonals out left and right and trying to turn Arsenal around nice and quickly. That stuff, it felt like we were going to be able to kind of live with that now, because it was going to happen far less frequently, given that Chelsea were down to 10 men and then they score. Was it even a free kick that then led to the corner from which they scored? Who knows? That's up for debate, I suppose. The corner comes in. Not really sure there's a lot that you can do about that. We are the set piece kings. I often look at our set piece routines, and I try sometimes look at it from the opposition side, and I say, well, what would I have done to try and deal with that? And sometimes I look at them and I say, you just can't. If they win the flick on, it's as simple as that. The ball can end up anywhere, and that's what happened. Saliba gets there in front of the near post, and he diverts it, and it loops into the back of the net, and Chelsea have the lead. But again, you're going to call me crazy. Yes, obviously the red card helped us, but do you know what? So did Chelsea's goal, because it meant that they had something to hold on to. It meant that Chelsea had something to defend, to protect, and that saw them drop a little bit deeper than they had done earlier on in the game. And that allowed us to breathe a little bit at the back. It allowed Mosquera and Hincapie to feel comfortable in stepping out a little bit higher, to have time on the ball that they just did not have in that first half. And as a result of that, surprise, surprise, their distribution improved and they started moving the ball through the lines better. And Zubimendi had more time on the ball and Declan Rice had more time on the ball because he was now playing as a 6 after Zubimendi went off. But he was sort of having to kind of police that number 6 position because of what had happened in the first half. That was clearly something that Mikel put across to him at the break, but it should have happened earlier. That's my view. It should have happened earlier. So the red card, obviously having that man advantage puts you in a good position, but the Chelsea goal, which then meant they had something to protect, just saw them drop off a little bit and made them less aggressive. And that, for me, worked for us because it allowed us to start to get a foothold in the game. I mentioned right at the top that there were 6 changes made across both teams. Arsenal made 4 of those changes, okay? Only 2 of them worked for me. And let's work our way through them. We won't talk about the Chelsea changes. You know what? We'll touch on the Chelsea changes briefly. Esteval for Garnacho. Garnacho is not better than Esteval. So that didn't work. João Pedro replaced by Delap. João Pedro caused us all sorts of problems. I couldn't wait to see the back of him. When I saw his number go up on the board, I was relieved. Because Rory Delap, I call him Rory Delap. Sorry, Liam Delap. Rory's his dad, the long throw guy. Remember him? Liam Delap is not as good an all-round player, I don't think, as João Pedro. So Delap coming on actually benefited us. So I think we're talking about Mikel Arteta maybe not doing everything he could have done in order to put Arsenal in a position where they could potentially have achieved a better result. But Enzo Maresca, I think, shot his team in the foot as well. Now, I'll admit that I'm not as across Chelsea as I am Arsenal, and maybe there were some fitness issues and other factors that needed to be taken into consideration there, but it certainly weakened them, taking João Pedro off and bringing Delap on. So Arsenal make the change at the break. Miles Lewis-Skelly on for Ricardo Calafiori. We went into half-time with 3 of our back 4 on yellow cards, and it should have been 4 of our back 4. And we had Zubimendi on a yellow card. Something had to change. Something had to change. Carrying that many players in that crucial area of the pitch on bookings was an accident waiting to happen. And Mikel, in my opinion, had to be proactive and change that. Does Ricardo Calafiori have an injury? That's what everybody will be worried about. A, because Ricardo Calafiori's got a patchy injury record, to put it nicely. And B, because he looked like he was uncomfortable towards the end of that first half. Either way, it was a player that was coming on to take over from someone that was on a booking and in a very precarious situation and having to deal with Esteval over and over and over again. Brings on Miles Lewis-Skelly. What does Miles Lewis-Skelly do? Gets caught, gets booked because he didn't know, for me, when the right time was to squeeze out and push and when the right time was to drop off. Is it a case that Miles Lewis-Skelly is trying so hard to impress when he does get opportunities now, because those opportunities have been limited, that he's making rash decisions? That calmness and composure that we really kind of praised him for last season, that seems to have gone out the window with Miles Lewis-Skelly. And I get it. He's not playing a lot. Okay. He's going to be rusty. I understand it. But at the same time, at the highest level, we can't have that. We need people to be calm. We need people to understand what the task at hand is. We need them to understand the challenges that the team are facing, and we need them to play accordingly. And he didn't. He come out. He ended up getting into a thing with Reece James. He takes Reece James out. He gets a booking. And then we're back to square one. We're back to square one, where 3 of our back 4 are on yellow cards. And we've got Martin Zubimendi sitting at the base of our midfield alongside Declan Rice, also on a booking. Mikel made some other changes. He brought Odegaard on for Zubi, which I thought was the right thing. Zubimendi on a booking. in a game like that, where it is a scrap and a physical battle more than anything else, more than it is a football match, not as effective. Because if he can't make challenges, then, you're in trouble. And so Mikel was right to make that change. And Odegaard changed something for us. There's been a lot of people during his absence that have gone, Odegaard, we don't miss him, blah, blah, blah. Eze's this, Eze's that. Yeah, Eze's a lot of things, and he's a wonderful, wonderful footballer. But there are games that Eze goes missing in, and this was one of them. And again, I'm not sitting here saying he's a bad player or anything like that. Please don't take it that way. But this was not a game for him. This was a game for Martin Odegaard. And I honestly believe that had Martin Odegaard been fit enough, he would have started, because the difference that he made when he came onto the pitch was huge. All of a sudden, you've got someone playing in your midfield that isn't lost in between the lines, that is coming deep, that is getting on the ball. The amount of times I saw him come deep, get on the ball, roll it to the centre back, demand it straight back, turn, carry it 10 yards, roll it to the winger, demand it back, turn inside, go the other way, change the direction. And he just brought a zip and a tempo to our football that had been missing throughout the game up until the point he was introduced. Odegaard's impact was big yesterday. Big in terms of giving us control. Now, he didn't score, he didn't assist, but he gave us control. And is he a little bit rusty? Yeah, of course, he's been out for a while. It's to be expected. But it just, for me, it really kind of highlighted that when we're all sitting here saying Eze or Odegaard, it's horses for courses. That's how you should be looking at this. This was a game for Martin Odegaard. The game against Tottenham was a game for Eberechi Eze. And that's okay. That's fine. It's fine to look at certain games and to watch games unfold and change your mind with regards to which one is better suited and which one's going to have the better impact and the more influence. The Martinelli for Madueke change. This one was interesting. At the time the team came out, I felt in my gut that it was a little bit harsh on Noni Madueke for him to be left out. I thought he came on against Bayern. He replaced Trossard during that first half. He played really well. He scores a goal. He's playing against his former club. He's going to be bang up for this. And then I saw Martinelli's name on the team sheet once we learned that Trossard wasn't available. And I thought, not sure about that. Martinelli was really ineffective in this game. For me, as the game unfolded, it became clearer and clearer that we needed more in the interior. And Martinelli's an exterior player for me, at least most of the time. He likes to break into the interior to score goals and to get on the end of chances, and that's fine. But his starting position is always in the exterior. And he was lost. He wasn't involved. He had a shot in the first half that Sanchez saved down to his right. But other than that, largely ineffective. And so when Madueke comes on and Odegaard's coming on, because they came on at the same time, I thought, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I also talked in the lead up to this game on the episode with Mike about Madueke playing from the left and how that might benefit us, because if we can work the ball out there early and he can deliver early, when you've got a one-touch finishing striker like Mikel Merino, I call him a striker because he's so damn good at it at the moment in terms of taking chances, then that could be the key. That could work. It didn't work with Madueke yesterday. And that's on Madueke for me. It's on Madueke for me, and I'll explain why. What I wanted to see from Noni Madueke, and we'll just quickly go. No, I don't need the tactics ball for this. It's all right. What I wanted to see from Madueke was come on the pitch, inject a bit of energy, inject a bit of tempo, and pull wide. Okay? You're a left-footed player playing on the left wing. You should want to be wide, at least in your starting position. Now, you could argue that as the ball starts to make its way across the pitch, you want to just tuck in a little bit so that when you receive it, there is space and there is an angle to go on the outside of the fullback and try and beat him that way. But if you're on the pitch to deliver early balls into the penalty box towards our striker, who is a big man, who's great aerially, who's an excellent one-touch finisher, Mikel Merino on the day, then for me, you need to pull wide. You know why you need to pull wide? Because when the ball is pinged and fizzed into you, you've got time to receive it. You've got time to glance up, have a look at what's going on in the middle, And then you should have the technical ability to deliver first time, as long as the pass to you is right, and try and expose the opposition's defense. And no, like it didn't happen like that. It didn't work that way. He kept tucking in. And then when he got the ball, he'd have 2-3 players around him. He's got nowhere to go. He looked like he was distracted to me. He looked like he wasn't quite at it. He looked like the booing, the stick he was getting from the Chelsea fans, it looked like that got to him as far as I could see. It wasn't the Noni Madueke that we've seen at Arsenal so far. And I appreciate that it was coming on in a difficult game under difficult circumstances. But, you know, where I thought it was maybe harsh that he was left out going into the game, I sort of looked at that and then I thought, well, what will we be saying now if he did start the game and he performed like that? Well, you could argue he might not have performed like that had he started the game and he wasn't coming into it cold. I just don't know. But basically, that substitution made zero difference whatsoever. So I think Mikel got sort of 50% of the changes right in terms of the way that they impacted the game. Yeah, Madueke for me, really, really underwhelming and disappointing yesterday. Look, this was a super physically demanding game, and it was always going to be the case that after playing Spurs off the back of an international break and then playing Bayern, another really high level game, that we were going to be struggling a little bit for that physical edge. And the hope was that we would start the game well, put ourselves in a good position, and that we could start to make changes as the game went on, with the view to consolidating rather than with a view to trying to win, or like in the latter stages of the game. I'm talking about, obviously, you want to win from the outset. But it didn't really pan out that way. It kind of went from, you know, we're under it here. We need to get a grip. Uh-oh, now we're behind. But they're down to 10 men. So even though it's not going the way we want it to and we're not playing particularly well, the kind of onus on us is to go on and win this. And we try that. Doesn't really work. But at the same time, we were managing the potential risk of conceding another on the break. And in the end, we did neither. You know, so it's a really kind of strange game to analyze, as I've said. Let me just have a quick glance at my notes. Is there anything else that I want to highlight? I think, as I said, the red card obviously gives people that feeling that we should have won it, and I agree with that, and that's why I'm disappointed this morning. But at the same time, we were poor in so many facets of the game that maybe asking for a victory or expecting a victory was a little bit too much, given that it just wasn't clicking. And you have days like that. But what that red card did was it made Chelsea have to retreat. And then the fact that they got the goal so early in the second half, that added to their desire to just be a little bit more compact and sit that little bit deeper. And although it meant that we were facing a low block, the very thing that we don't want to play against, and we moan about it all the time, actually that probably saved us from going on and losing a game that we could have quite easily lost. Look, if you told me that we'd have 7 points from these 3 games, I'd have taken that. I'd have rathered that we got 6 in the league and 1 in the Champions League, but hey, you can't have it all, right? So it's not been a perfect week, but it's been a positive week overall. And I think it's important that we don't forget that. You know, we were without Saliba today. That meant a shuffling of the pack at the back. It didn't really work. The yellow cards didn't help. And I want to pull up Anthony Taylor a little bit, because I do feel like he could have managed the game differently. I have to say, having watched the game back this morning, I do feel a lot less strongly about this than I did yesterday. Yesterday, I was watching the game unfold and I was like, in my head, I'm like, what have you done? Like, you're just handing out cards for fun early on. You've set a precedent now that you must adhere to. And as a result of that, you're impacting the game. Every team, both sides are looking to do is get each other in the book. And, you know, it's just become a really scrappy, messy game, impacted by the way that the referee's gone about it. But then I watched the game back and I sort of went through each of the yellow cards. There wasn't a single one of them, guys, that wasn't a yellow card. That wasn't a yellow card offense. And so while I think he probably could have let 1 or 2 things go in terms of brandishing those yellow cards as early as he did, and maybe that would have made him have an easier afternoon, maybe the spectacle wouldn't have been as impacted, maybe the game for us watching would have been far more entertaining as a result. there's a part of me that looks at those decisions and goes, well, okay, well, which one do you allow to pass? Because if you allow them to pass, then I'm going to be sitting here saying, as is everybody else, that was a yellow card. You should have dealt with it. The one that he got wrong, I think, was the Caicedo one. And obviously then Caicedo goes and gets himself sent off. But, you know, there'll be people of a Chelsea persuasion and of a neutral persuasion that will say, Caicedo getting sent off spoiled the game. Well, if Anthony Taylor books Caicedo for that first incident, he does not make that challenge on Mikel Merino. And Mikel Merino's lucky he didn't get his bloody ankle broken. It's a horrible tackle from Caicedo. So, yeah, there's so many things in this game that you can argue both ways. That's why it's got my mind frazzled. Fascinating game to analyze this one. Our depth was really put to the test. It really was. And, you know, as I say, I predicted the 1-1 before the game because I thought that it would be one step too far. I didn't know that we'd be without Saliba, but equally, I didn't know they'd go down to 10 men. Those two, maybe you could argue, cancel each other out. And yeah, just a tough day at the office that we've got to move on from. But you know what? We've got to learn. That's the most important thing here. We've got to learn. There's a few things that we need to learn. So, for example, I'll just kind of summarize the points that I've made in terms of what I've taken away from this game. If the game is uber physical, as it was yesterday, it's not a game for Eberechi Eze. Unless you think you can dominate without him doing the donkey work in midfield, then it's not the game for him. Hincapie and Mosquera, as a pair, do not have the level of distribution that is required to move us through the lines effectively. I'm starting to look at Hincapie and wonder if he's more of a fullback than a centre-back. I know he's played both positions in his career to date. Declan Rice in these games, and I've been talking about this all season, and I've praised Arsenal for doing it at times, but for whatever reason, we didn't start the game that way yesterday. Cannot vacate the midfield as often as he did when we're playing against a team like this that are going to pull our centre-backs up and down and create room in midfield for their runners to sprint into. When that's the game, Declan Rice has to be closer to Zubimendi. They have to sit as a pair. It wasn't just Rice, it was Zubimendi too. The speed with which both of them were willing to vacate those spaces whenever we sort of had the sniff of starting a bit of build-up, it was naive for me. And I know that's their game, and I know that's what they've been drilled to do, but the coach on the sidelines has got to be reining them in there and saying, what are you doing? Stability first. You know, there's a lot of people that don't like the way Mikel Arteta's teams go about playing football. They say it's too negative. It's defense first. It's safety first. There are times for that, and there are times for being more open and expansive. Yesterday was not a time to try and be open and expansive, given the injury problems, given the fatigue that there would have been within the group, having just navigated the week that we had. And so I was confused, actually, to see us approach the game in the way that we did. Calafiori was nowhere near his usual self. His passing wasn't great. He wasn't effective getting forward. Jurriën Timber was limited. Fair play to Chelsea for that. But also, you know, Jurriën Timber is probably knackered. Look how much work he's done in the course of the week so far. So I can understand that. Every time I sort of go to sort of stick the boot in and say, this was really bad and this was really bad, I can always kind of think of some counterpoints and arguments to that largely center around fatigue and injuries. You know, lots of people talking about the Saliba miss, rightly so. But my word, did we miss Leandro Trossard yesterday. You know, I talked about needing a bit more in the interior. When you've got a false nine, you need players that get close to him. Eze gets close to him, but was very ineffective yesterday. Trossard has got the ability to play like a winger and do the job required of a wide player, but also to come into that interior and do it as well as a number 10. That's what Trossard brings to the table that Martinelli doesn't. And we missed him. We missed him badly. Right. I think that's about everything that I want to say on the game. I haven't really mentioned our goal, have I? Which I thought, look, great wing play from Saka down the right. And Merino rises high, hangs in the air just about long enough and heads in from close range. Really good finish from him again. Yeah, I mean, again, mind is absolutely frazzled. Let's get some of your thoughts and questions. Let's take a really short pause. When we come back, we'll do exactly that. We'll take your thoughts and your questions from the live chat. So start getting them in.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you in the comments, whether you're watching us live or if you're listening to this back later on. Remember, hype the video as well if you're with us on YouTube. That also really helps. So like, hype, subscribe. Check us out on Patreon as well. Patreon.com/Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below. Let's go into some of your questions now and some of your thoughts as well. Rascuna says Martinelli, nothing all game. I agree. Hugely ineffective on the day. AJ says Eze ghosted. There are certain game states. I also believe we need a more mobile and athletic midfielder with Rice Harry. Do you know what? That's really, really interesting because when we signed Zubimendi, do you remember the shit I got in the comments for saying, not sure about him athletically and physically. Now he's better in that department than I gave him credit for prior to his arrival at Arsenal. But it's in games like yesterday where I think that gets exposed a little bit. And it's kind of one of those things, right, where the benefits of Zubimendi outweigh the negatives. But every now and then, there will come a point where that is exposed. And Zubimendi's clever enough to know when to make a tactical foul to get himself out of trouble. But then that puts him on a yellow card, which then really limits him. And I thought Zubimendi never really stood a chance yesterday of imposing himself on the game because once he'd picked up that booking, he had to be really conservative in his positioning. He had to be less aggressive in the challenge. He had to play with less bite. And I thought as a result of that and Eze being a part of the midfield, a player that it's just not his game to be that physical dual monster, we were really, really lacking bite in the middle of the park, particularly in that first half. Nifty Legend says, against Liverpool, we were too conservative and we got done for it. We try and be expansive and people give us stick for it. Different game, I get it, but we also had to go for the game. My issue, he says, is that we didn't do enough to win the game. Honestly, mate, I don't think even if we played for another half an hour, we'd have scored another goal yesterday. I know we had sort of half chances. There was the timber header over the bar late on in the game. That was difficult. You know, there was the goalkeeper spilling an effort that Gyökeres tried to latch onto. There was kind of half chances, but it just was one of those days where it didn't click. Like, I think there's a difference between saying we didn't try and win the game or we couldn't win the game. I think yesterday we couldn't win the game in that we were trying the right things. The changes we made were positive changes. You know, there was a period in the game where we were playing with Rice as the 6, Odegaard and Eze in the midfield. Like, we did try and win the game, but we didn't have enough quality on the day to make that happen. And so this was a case of a lack of quality on this given occasion rather than it being about the approach. I don't come away from this game thinking Mikel was too conservative. If anything, I thought he needed to be more conservative from the start of the game. And if he did, maybe we'd have got a foothold in the game. Maybe we'd have built gradually up to a point where we were the completely dominant force. But I feel like we sort of played into Chelsea's hands from the beginning. They were aggressive. They were sharp. You know, they're young. They're enthusiastic. The Stamford Bridge crowd was feeding off that. I can't remember ever going to Stamford Bridge and looking around and thinking, this is an atmosphere. But yesterday I did, because they were feeding off what the players were doing. It's very similar to what we were like in the earlier days under Mikel, sort of 2-3 years in, when you started to get the feeling that things were going well. The crowd were feeding off that energy that was, and at times we were over emotional and we got a lot of stick for that. And I thought Caicedo was overly emotional yesterday with that horrible challenge that he went lunging into and it ended up costing them. They remind me of where we were 2-3 seasons ago. But I don't think we could have won the game yesterday, just in terms of nobody performed to the level that we know they're capable of. I talked about it first half, so many sloppy passes. Afsar says, once again, why do we get so many injuries in training? No idea. And this is one of those subjects that it always creates debate because everybody's desperate to know why it is that we keep losing players. But at the same time, it's one of those questions that we would never be able to answer because we're not at Colney and we don't know exactly what happens. It could have been something really, really innocuous, right? It could have been light training game. Someone steps on his foot. Someone bangs knees with him. Like you just don't know. I think when we talk about us running players into the ground and then them picking up muscular injuries, you kind of look at that and you go, well, that could have been preventable if we were a little bit smarter with X, Y, and Z. But there are certain injuries that you can't prevent. And again, I'm not saying that this isn't something that needs to be looked at. And I'm not saying that it is, it is unfair to ask this question. What I'm simply saying is that I can't answer this question. And therefore, I prefer not to sit and point fingers at any one individual or group because that would just be me venting for no real reason because I don't actually know. Guitar Solo says you can see the difference in Noni and Madueke. Noni and Martinelli when they play on the left and the right. Arteta has specific instructions for our left winger. How can you not see that? Well, maybe he has instructions for the left winger in certain games, but you have to be adaptable and flexible and change that. Like yesterday, Chelsea are a goal up. We then equalised 10, 11 minutes later, and it became very, very clear at that point that Chelsea would have been happy with the draw. So much so that at the full-time whistle, there were loud cheers. Now, I'm not being the celebration police. You're a Chelsea fan. You're watching this young team grow and develop. And you're seeing them take another stride forward, okay, by holding the side that a lot of people think are going to win the league with 10 men. You're going to be proud of that. There's no reason not to feel that pride. There's nothing wrong with feeling pride in what Chelsea did. But that should highlight to Arsenal fans how far we've come. The fact that Chelsea feel that way, a team that used to roll us over year after year after year, feel that way about getting a draw against us. Okay? And the reason I talk about that is because their approach was clearly to shut up shop at that point. And if they could nick something on the break, happy days. Well, then if someone shuts up shop and prioritizes the width of the penalty box, you got to do something different. You can't play into that. You don't have your left winger starting in that inside position where he can't even barely receive the ball because every time it gets near him, there's 3 or 4 players around him. No, you pull him out of there. You pull him wide. You tell him, come wide, receive the ball, and then travel inside. What did we bring Noni Madueke to the club for? We brought him into the club because he's a dribbler, because he's unpredictable, because he draws the attention of other players. And what did we do? We placed him in a position where he was never going to be able to do any of that. And it needs to be on the player as well. If you can see 10 minutes in, hold on, this isn't working, come wider, try something different. There was a period in the game where he swapped wings with Bukayo Saka. He went over and played on the right-hand side for about 5-6 minutes. Complete and utter waste of time. Because the only joy that we were looking like we might have was from Saka on that right-hand side. He created the goal. He flashed the ball across the box a few times. He had a couple of shots over the bar. He was the only one that we might have had some joy through in terms of the wide players yesterday. And we took him out of his preferred position for 6 or 7 minutes and switched him over with Madueke, who did nothing over there. For me, neither of them did a good enough job yesterday. Not Noni, not Gabby. And we really missed Leandro Trossard. But I tell you this, Leandro Trossard, he does like to work in the interior. I've touched on that already. But I guarantee you, Leandro Trossard would have had the in-game intelligence to see that actually standing in that sort of half space at points was not working for him. And he'd have come wider to at least receive the ball. And then he'd have built from there. Lots of questions about Saka, his decision-making, is his quality not good enough? I don't agree with any of that. As I said, it was a bad day at the office for everyone. Jid said, what's lacking with Premier League teams that doesn't seem to be lacking in the Championship? Former players have spoken about how much harder the Championship is yet they play a lot of football with thinner, usually older squads, and they don't whine about overplaying injuries or fitness. The tempo is a lot slower. The quality is a lot lower as well. Because what people, I think, overlook at times when you're talking about fatigue, it's not just about how much distance you can cover. You take tired touches, you play tired passes. Fatigue, it has an impact in all aspects of your game. And then you talk about, the Championship versus the Premier League. Well, if you make a mistake as a defender in the Championship, guess what? The opposition player is not always good enough to punish you for it. In the Premier League, most of the time they are. And so there's loads of errors in the Championship. Believe me, I cover a lot of EFL football. There is a lot of errors. The standard is nowhere near. There is a massive, massive drop-off. But if you play a sloppy pass out from the back, a lot of the time you won't be punished for it. If you lose a defender, lose an attacker who spins in behind you, a lot of the time he won't be good enough to tuck it away. So the game is very, very different. It's not as simple as saying, well, they play more games and they don't moan about being tired. They play a lot more games, but at a much lower standard. And that's the point, I think, there. What else have we got? Just on that Timber chance that I mentioned, KWE Stone says, if Timber left it, Gyökeres would have scored. Probably would have. Let's continue rolling through the chat. Lots of criticism for Bukayo Saka. Was he at his best yesterday? No, but I do think that's harsh when you look at the broader context of the game and how many people, were below the level that they usually are at. Bobby Rowland says, yesterday's game proves that Arsenal still lack killer instinct. A title-winning team should be able to grab any match by the scruff of the neck, especially against 10 men. I feel like you are making a mountain out of a molehill. I feel like a lot of people are making mountains out of molehills with regards to the reaction to this game. I asked the question at the top of the show, good point or bad point? The answer is somewhere in between. It's a good point given all the factors. It's a bad point given one factor, which is that Moises Caicedo was sent off and Chelsea played a large part of the game with 10 men. That's the only thing that should make you believe that this was a bad point. But when you offset that against the fact that we had a poor day in terms of individual performances, we had a bad day in terms of injury news, losing William Saliba. The yellow cards hampered us. I'm not saying that that's anybody else's fault. That's our own fault. We picked them up. And they were rightly yellow cards. My point is, it's been a good week overall. And so you can... This is a great way to summarize the pod, actually. And I'm going to finish up on this. I think this is a good way to break it down. What you've got to decide, okay? You've got to draw two diagrams, okay? Reasons it's a good point. Okay, it's a good point because we played Tottenham and Bayern already this week, and we were dead on our feet. It's a good point because we went to Stamford Bridge without William Saliba and Gabriel and Trossard, and without a fit striker, and without a fit Martin Odegaard. Okay? It's a good point because we were losing the game. It's a good point because overall, since the international break, we have extended our lead by a point over the team that we believe are our biggest rivals for the title in Manchester City. Okay, that's 5 reasons I've given you why it's a good point. Why is it a bad point? It's a bad point because they were down to 10 men for about 55 minutes in the game. Does that outweigh all of the things that went against us? No, come on. Of course it doesn't. You're talking 5-1 here. So my conclusion is that it's a good point. If this was April, May, I'd be looking at it differently. But it's November. And it kind of really dawned on me yesterday when I heard people talking about the broader context of this game that it is just still I mean, it's December today. Happy new month, everybody. But yesterday it was November. Like, even if you're talking about December, it's still way too early to be saying that a point like that is a bad one, is a disastrous one. And listen, you might feel that deep down, okay? You might feel that deep down in your gut. And that's absolutely fine if you do. I'm not here to tell people how they should feel. But why do we want to create a negative mood around the football club right now? Because if we go and beat Brentford on Wednesday night and we go and get the result we want at Villa next weekend, all of a sudden people will be looking at that point against Chelsea in a very, very different way. There's been so much talk, you know, from people mainly outside of Arsenal circles, to the effect of Arsenal have won the league. It's Arsenal's to lose. Arsenal are going to motor away with it. Arsenal are going to cruise to the title. Nobody's going to get anywhere near them. And I've been repeatedly saying, no, way too early to say that. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Sometimes a game like yesterday's, where you've not really done any damage because you've managed to get a point under difficult circumstances, but you are well off it in terms of your performance, sometimes that can serve as a wake-up call. And you're better off having the wake-up call when you've still got enough about you to get through the game without doing any damage than having it in April or May. And so maybe just at a time where we were starting to get a little bit carried away, having watched our side batter Tottenham the way that we did, and then comprehensively beat one of the best teams in Europe in Bayern Munich, maybe there is something to gain from the fact that we went to Stamford Bridge and we weren't at our level, in terms of just refocusing everybody and sharpening everyone up for what's to come. Look at it that way. That's how I'm going to round off today's pod. A massive thank you to everybody who has joined us on the show today. Thank you so much for your love and support. I know there's so much amazing Arsenal content out there now after every single game that I appreciate that you choose to spend some of your time and give some of your bandwidth to the Chronicles of a Gooner with me. Thank you so much for that. Remember, if you're with us on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. There's a Patreon piece coming out later. So come and sign up over there, and that way you won't miss it. You get access to our exclusive bonus content. You get every episode ad-free, and you get membership to our Discord server, all for less than the price of a cup of coffee. And it really does help. Thank you all so much. I will see you all. Yeah, I'll see you all on the Patreon pod. I mean, I might change my mind how I feel about it by then. But look, having worked my way through all of the points that I wanted to make today, I'm still not going to go as far as saying good point. But it's more a good point than it is a bad point. Does that make sense? I don't care if it does or not. I'll catch you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful Monday. Up the Arsenal.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners.